the Growing Your Own Money podcast. Dean Thorpe, a CEO and financial advisor, and his son James Thorpe, a social media marketing business owner, sit down and discuss all things to do with money, goals, business, and the markets.
So, there's no denying that personal finances and being able to control your finances is a huge part of life, business, and without it, it's survival, isn't it? At the end of the day, you need money to survive in the current world and the way the world works.
Yes.
Today I'd like to explore your view on personal finances and how you can educate yourself financially.
Well, stripping it right back, you got to go back to the piggy bank days. You remember that, James?
Yeah.
The first thing I always recommend when someone has a child, buy them a little piggy bank, because you cannot start too soon in handling money, dealing with money, touching money, talking about money, particularly saving money. Very easy to spend, can be another matter to save. And that kind of principle of receiving some pocket money or spending money. Pocket money I prefer to spending money, because the pocket money you can then decide what to do with. If you're receiving something called spending money, what do you do with it? You spend it. And as I've said in a previous podcast, rich people tend to save their money first and spend what's left. And I don't mean rich people in a monetary sense necessarily. So thinking about that principle, and I remember there was a board game that was piloted about 12, 13 years ago that I was involved with. The CII, the Chartered Insurance Institute, came up with this board game idea that we took into a few secondary schools just to kind of trial out in an attempt to teach some of the secondary school students a little bit about not just money but risk and investments as well as savings, because for me it's something that is definitely not touched on enough within our education system and absolutely in school systems. I think there is a plethora of places that you can go for your kind of self-education. You've always got to be careful to check those things out. You've got the money saving website, you've got massive other different types of comparison type websites where you can go for information. The comparison websites are often incentivized by pushing you down a particular route, because they'll either get kickbacks in terms of advertising or a bit of commission for clicking through or purchasing some kind of product. So it's finding a site that you can find some reliance on, some trust on, and cross-check it. Surprisingly, the government website does actually produce quite a lot of reasonable information. I wouldn't say it's always easy to read, but the way that they've kind of rebadged it and relaunched it over the last 4 or 5 years, it's a reasonable place to go for checking things out. Things like power of attorney and probate, and just general information around what can be quite complicated or complex areas of the financial world. It does lift a lid on it to some extent. Being in financial services myself, I would always advocate approaching an advisor. And I've heard, barriers to that of, well, I'll have to pay, even mortgage. If I go and see an advisor, I've got to pay for the advice. Well, sometimes paying for advice can be worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
If you're looking to take out a mortgage, that means you're looking into investing in one of the most significant and possibly largest investments that you will ever make, i.e. the investment into a property.
Yeah.
Albeit that you're going to live in it, but it's likely to be a minimum 6-figure sum that you're investing, a minimum 5-figure sum that you're borrowing. So why would you not take advice and pay somebody who is an expert in that field to help you in working out which route to go. I'm always guarded about the financial press. There can be some good stories in there, but quite often they are not always people who have got some form of financial qualification. So anything you read in the financial press needs to then be cross-checked or qualified by something else that you might find or see online. Don't take it as read that is accurate, that is the correct statement.
Definitely. I think that's good advice for everything that you see online, though, isn't it?
Well, exactly.
It's as simple as typing into Google and you get all these results, and actually, how true actually is this stuff? Anyone can put something on Google. How true is the thing that's getting on there?
Indeed. In terms of what we offer within my business, you do the social media, you help us with our social media. So a lot of that is around education. And it isn't always driving new business and new clients to our business. It's also about giving a little bit back through our social media posts and blog posts. Some of what we put out there is about education. Definitely. And it's about helping people to understand a little bit more, because in the Western world, we have got far too technical around tax, around investment products and savings products. It is quite complicated. It is a minefield at times, and it is difficult to know who and what to trust. So looking for areas like that, like ours, that put things out, trusted sources, well-established institutions that are able to share something of what is going on. In my own personal meetings with clients, I often go from a perspective of attempting to do away with the jargon and try and put it into what I call plain English. And the way that I advise clients and the culture and philosophy across the firm, which you'll find repeated with all the other advisors, is that if I was in your shoes, this is the advice that I would be giving myself. Yeah. Now, I've got to take into account all of that person's situation, current position, emotions, which would be different to mine, but I still want to provide them with an advice and recommendation that I would want to receive if it was me in their shoes. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense, definitely.
So there are books. I've touched on my own book before, Growing Your Own Money. Great starting point in terms of principles. That again is a kind of little coaching manual around getting people to think about not just educating themselves with money and finance, but what's your relationship with money? How do you see yourself with money? What are your habits in relation to money and finances? Do you spend it all and then save if there's something left? Yeah. Can you change that habit? Have you had a genuine think about aligning your goals, your personal aim, where you're trying to get to with your relationship with money?
And I hear online, whether it's through influencers or through people who are trying to make a positive change to people's life financially on a broad scale, I hear the term that financial literacy is the language of the elite. And I think to a certain degree I agree with that, but obviously you're going to be more qualified to talk on that. So what are your thoughts on that as a statement, and sort of are there any ways that you can develop your financial literacy?
As I've touched on, products and tax can be and is very often very confusing. The terms that we use in our industry and the kind of models, I think a lot of it can be stripped away and explained at a much more simplified level to help people to understand. For me, there is still far too much, not paperwork. We've managed to reduce paperwork with the advent of electronic mail and email and so on, but there's still a heck of a lot of information that can be relayed when someone might purchase a financial product, and that could be just a relatively straightforward bank or savings account, the amount of information that still has to change hands with the terms and conditions and everything else is, for me, it feels too much.
Mm-hmm.
And notwithstanding the fact that there has to be terms and conditions, people just need that kind of executive summary, as I call it, at the front, that explains it in bullet form. This is what you've got, this is where you're going. Yes, there always needs to be additional information, and albeit that small print, but as I think statistics will show, very few people read all the small print. So it's about institutions waking up to that fact, becoming more trustworthy, and presenting something that is easier to understand, that gives you that good front page summary, and actually delivers what that person is wanting. So the regulator talks about good consumer outcomes. Why is the regulator having to talk about that? The industry should be talking about good consumer outcomes, because it's about getting people closer to where they want to be in life.
Definitely.
So good that the regulator is using that term, but most of us should have been using that term for most of our lives. We're trying to get you somewhere.
Yeah.
We want to get you there. We want you to have a good outcome. So unfortunately, the industry needs to do more. I and we in my business will continue to do as much as we can to help with that. But it's like the starfish analogy, when the starfish have all been washed up on the beach, and you look at it and you think, oh my goodness, where do we start? And there's a little girl in amongst the starfish throwing one at a time back into the sea.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's the principle that I will continue to apply. We will attempt to reach and meet and educate as many people as we possibly can, acknowledging the fact that we can only touch and meet so many. But that won't stop us attempting it.
Definitely. From your experience within the financial advice industry, have you seen, I'm sure you will have seen, people sort of tripping up over these financial terms and coming back to that financial literacy term again? Can it have a significant impact if people aren't aware of what terms mean? Yes,
it can. And it's about getting your head round what kind of core products you might need. So in an earlier podcast, we touched on short, medium and long, didn't we? So the kind of short-term principle of you've got your current account, you've got a bank account, savings accounts, fixed term deposits, maybe national savings. Your medium term would be something like an investment account linked in with some form of investment ISA, if you've not got a cash ISA within your bank savings. Your longer term investments would be something around some kind of retirement or pension account. Now, in simple terms, those are the three core product areas that you've got. Every financial institution will call it something different. Somebody will call it a pension, a retirement account. Someone will call it a pension investment account. Someone else will call it a personal pension. Someone else will call it a defined contribution pension plan. At the end of the day, it's a pension.
Yeah.
It's a retirement account that you are using to build up funds that you can access from a minimum age, which is typically 10 years prior to your state pension age in the UK. But then that pot of money or that vehicle will provide you with an income for the rest of your life when you start drawing it.
Yeah.
The medium-term pot has a lot more flexibility. Even then, there are different types of ISAs. There's the lifetime ISA, there's historically the Help to Buy ISA, there's a cash ISA, there's an investment ISA. But the principle of all of those remains that you can invest into something. It's pretty much tax-free, both in terms of the return it makes from income or interest and any capital return. The lifetime ISA may have some additional tax relief and or penalties if you take it out early. But principally, the reason I kind of pigeonhole that as a medium-term product is it's something that you should be able to access in the kind of 5 to 20 year timeline. Theoretically, you could access it earlier than 5 years, but I always say give it 5 years. But it's essentially an open-ended investment of some kind. And then you've got, as I've touched on, the bank savings account type rates, which are just subject to interest being paid. So those are the three kind of buckets or areas. Get your heads around that, and that will help in terms of overcoming this kind of tarnished industry technical terms that unfortunately we've got. And it's not just in the UK, it's Europe, it's North America as well, with various different types of products. But if you can understand those kind of three principles and those aspects and identify what you have and don't have, that should help you in terms of putting it all together. The more assets you have, then the more I would advocate advice, but I would always advocate advice anyway.
Yeah. You've seen and you've advised hundreds, if not thousands, or maybe more than thousands?
Maybe.
Thousands of people with their finances, their investments. I imagine that in that time, you've seen some mistakes. Are there any mistakes which are quite commonplace, which you'd sort of suggest people look out for?
Yeah. A lot of this is around emotion, and it's driven by emotion in financial products and financial markets. So the investment world, the stock market, let's call it, it doesn't matter whether it's the UK or globally or any particular area, is one of the most peculiar from an emotion point of view, because everything else in life, whether it's a car, basket of groceries, clothes, if the price is going up, in the investment world, the emotion appears to be they buy more, whereas in the non-investment world, you buy less. When the price is going down, the emotion is sell it, get out. Whereas in the non-investment world, groceries have gone down in price, a new car has gone down in price, you tend to want to buy more.
Yeah.
And that is, without question, one of the most common mistakes. And 2022, partly, but definitely in 2023, we saw a lot of that. We had a lot of those conversations where interest rates were rising, I can get 5% on my money. Investments at that point in time weren't, at that very moment in time, weren't generating anywhere near 5%. They may have even gone negative if they took a look back over the previous 12 months. So the psychology was, I'll sell now, my investments have gone down, I'll put it into the 5% and everything will be hunky-dory and super and smashy. Remember, it's a headline for a start.
Yeah.
Also remember that 5% that you've just bought into on a fixed term is the maximum that you can achieve. You've just sold out of an investment that's gone down and is more than likely going to rise at some point in the next 12 to 18 months. Lo and behold, it did.
Yeah.
By the end of the year, the majority of funds had risen over the course of the calendar year by at least 5%. So if you'd sold out in the middle of the year, locked yourself into the 5%, you'd crystallised the loss.
Yeah.
You'd got the 5%, but you didn't get the 5% until the end of the following 12 months. And you've got to get your head around that.
Yeah.
Because for some people, if it's February 2024 now, you've only got half of that 5% so far. Whereas if you'd been a bit more patient and not made that common mistake that psychologically you think, oh, I've got to get out.
Yeah.
If you'd just been patient, allowed things to recover on their own, the market shakes things out, you'd have seen that 5% typically by the end of the year. And now you're still invested, remember, in real assets that are producing some kind of return over and above the share price. That may be dividends, that may be interest, and there's still potential for the share price to increase as well. So you've got your 5% in 6 months, not 12, and you've still got the investment in that asset.
Definitely.
So which was the better investment over 6 months? That is a real common mistake. It's all mirrored around patience and headline rates and so on, but it's so important not to let emotion become the overriding driver in that environment. The other thing I would touch on is that people do compartmentalise. So they kind of keep their savings separate from their investments. And I often challenge people to look at the overall bigger picture. So whilst from a perception point of view, they might view the financial advisor that's looking after the long term and the medium term as not their money because the financial advisor's looking after that. What I have seen people do is they kind of hold on to the money that they can control in their savings accounts and their fixed term deposit accounts, because that's money that they can see and touch and get their hands on, but they hold on to that to the detriment of the other things. And what that again can do psychologically is they'll ask for money from the financial advisor controlled pots at the expense of the easy access savings accounts.
Yeah.
And it's about reminding both the financial advisor client relationship and good communication that it's your money. This is all your money. We're just looking after a bit of it for you. It's your money, but we're trying to do the best that we can. So sometimes there's merit in drawing from the cash-based assets rather than the pension or the medium investment-based assets.
Yeah.
And it's about getting your heads around all of that so that you're not drawing from something that actually you don't need because you could get it from here.
Yeah.
Just because it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yeah, it's interesting.